Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jaya Kula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
What's the difference between Spanda and Shakti?
Spanda, you mean?
Yeah, Spanda.
Mm-hmm. Well, Spanda is one way of talking about the vibratory aspect of life. And there's not really a difference between them. In all of the traditions that are grouped under Hinduism, generally, there are many different iterations of things. So there's many different words that are about the different valences, iterations, nuances of things, different personalities of things. So we can talk about Shakti many, many different ways. The word Shakti means power or creative power. Shakti is basically a way of talking about the living quality of everything, that hum of life, the vibratory quality of everything, and the relationship of everything to sound. So in the Trika tradition, Devi is sound. Devi is what speaks everything into existence or spells everything into existence. And we ourselves are sometimes called visible sound, which I think is just marvelous. Spanda particularly means that vibrational livingness, full of awareness. It's not just a mechanical vibration. That is undifferentiated or unconditioned. Sitting behind all of manifest life is the unconditioned or the absolute, whatever you want to call it. That reservoir of infinite potential, as it's called in Dzogchen, that infinite potential to reflect any and all self-expressions out of itself, of itself. So Spanda is most often referring to that plane of undifferentiated, homogeneous, pre-emissional, pre-form livingness that permeates everything. When you become more sensitive, when your perceptions are more open, you can feel it everywhere, in everything, in everyone, and even in space itself. And of course that Spanda is never separate from intelligence or awareness or luminosity. It's never separate from that, but we can talk about these different qualities of things or these different modes of being and becoming. But we're really just talking about one thing.
I was just wondering whether you might be able to talk about resentment a little bit. In some of the relationships, very close relationships I've had in my life, very often the way that I've coped is by kind of going to this deep place of empathy, of like really just trying to understand why they're doing what they're doing in order to some way mollify my own pain. But now that I'm growing older, I'm kind of looking at those patterns. I feel like I'm confronting some kind of resentment over just being treated in that way and not having any kind of room.
I don't mean to use an 80s term, but, I am a boomer, so what can I say? I don't know if even anyone uses this term anymore. Maybe it's been replaced by something else, but that's like a basic codependent kind of switchback in emotions where you are trying to forestall abandonment or people being mad at you or trying to make yourself be necessary to other people so you won't be abandoned or criticized by being ultra empathetic and ultra giving. And then, of course, resentment starts to build up because you're not being nourished properly, and that sense of lack of nourishment can really build. So there's a kind of well-worn switchback in that pattern between being over-accommodating and overly empathetic and then being resentful and angry. The ordinary way to work with that is to not overgive. Recognize your fear that if you don't overgive, you're going to be rejected. And then have a more midline, moderate, modest approach where you can be more discerning about when your giving is exhausting you or when you're just pouring all your energy into someone or something that isn't really nourishing for you. The courage that this takes is risking changing the terms of relationships with others and risking rejection. But the thing is that it really isn't empathy if there's a transactional underpinning to it. And that's what codependency really is. I'm going to give, and be empathetic and care for you, but I want something back from you. I want you to remain with me. I want you to love me and approve of me. And when that transaction doesn't occur, then the resentment happens. The antidote is to find your edge when it's just not nourishing to be giving anymore. And when you need to step away or take a break and let the cards fall where they may, just see what happens. Then the resentment won't happen. I'm sure most of us have seen this kind of pattern in operation either in ourselves or someone in our lives. It's very familiar to me anyway. My mom was really like that. She was super kappa and earth mama, but she was just over giving, and then she would get angry. She would get exhausted. She would give more than she really had to give, because she was trying to make everyone be in harmony and keep people close to her and become indispensable and all those kinds of motivations. And then she would go through periods of resentment, and I think this is just super common. But you need to find a middle road where you're preserving your energy and not pouring it into circumstances that are just draining your energy away, and where it's not really of use and you're not really being nourished.
I think my mom has done quite a bit of that, like in terms of just wanting to be indispensable and in some ways building her life around being helpful to me, but not always like in the ways that I need. And I've noticed in myself this anxiety around wanting to help her have that experience of being helpful to me, even if I don't need that point of help.
Well, you recognize the bargain that's trying to be struck. And this is one of the beauties of spiritual life, is that we can have more insight and still reach people with a feeling of love and that they're valued, but without feeding into their karmic patterns. We learn how to reassure people or how to show people love and respect, but without stepping into their patterns. You can start to see alternatives to just giving her the approval she wants. But thanks, Mom, that was really helpful. When inside you're thinking, oh my God, just go home. When we're a little more cool, we can have more discernment and more insight, and we can find ways, and our hearts are more open. We can find more ways to express that, but without perpetuating things so much. I often think about, okay, how can I reach this person with something heart-based, even though they're asking me for something else? You know, they're asking me for just ordinary approval. A lot of people relate that way. They want just ordinary approval, and it's Facebook likes. You know that it's never going to end, ever. Yeah. That's a situation where if you keep doing that for someone, if you keep giving them ordinary approval when they're basically angling for it, you're locked into this thing with them where they're just taking energy for something that's useless. Yeah. But if you can find a way to make them feel their own value more, then they don't need all those approvals. So it's kind of looking for a different way in. And you do have to break the contract, though. If you've been a dutiful daughter your whole life, then you're going to be breaking a contract if you don't lie, basically.
I am having trouble holding the things that need to happen, and they're taking up space in my mind, and there's things falling through the cracks. And I was wondering if you had advice about how to have less of my airtime be trying to remember to not let things slip through.
Okay. Well, you know about to-do apps, right?
I have them. That's the problem.
Well, there was an app, I mentioned it before, called Do One Thing, where you only have one to do in the app. And then when you finish that one thing, you put another one thing in it. I always thought it was extremely clever. I used to recommend it to people when I was doing Ayurvedic work with people, because Ayurveda can be very overwhelming with so many different things to do. So I would just say, use this app to just do one thing at a time. And when you've accomplished that one thing, then move on. I don't know if that would help.
That's actually kind of scary in a way that is maybe a good sign.
Yeah. I mean, if you have 5 things to do in a day, you can still just put one thing in at a time.
But then you have to have another list for the other 5 things.
You have to remember those other things.
I found, in a kind of magical and inexplicable way, that when I don't do stuff, it doesn't matter. There was somebody that said, if you have a to-do list with 25 things on it, just take everything but the top 5 things and throw them away. It usually doesn't matter, I found. Or you could think about, when I'm on my deathbed, what am I going to care about that I got done? I love the story I've told about myself many times. When I first moved to Portland, the very first time, I had a paper bag from a supermarket with some paperwork in it that was so important. I couldn't put it in the truck. I had to keep it with me so I could look at it, immediately upon arriving. I put it in a closet in my new place that I was living and never looked at it again, ever. And absolutely nothing happened. I don't know what was in there. I've never had any impact on anything from never doing these things. And again, it seems kind of alchemical and mystifying. I'm not really sure why that is. Unless I'm very bad at figuring out what's important and what's not.
No, I think you're very good at it and you do it naturally. So the things that have to happen, happen. Possibly.
Possibly.
So you just do all the adulting stuff without worrying about it. You just pay your bills. You make sure you have your will done. You do your taxes. It just flows out of you and you move on.
Everything but the taxes. Everything you said but the taxes. Every year when my taxes come up, it feels like I just did them last week.
Yes. Yes.
It just never, ever feels like a whole year went by.
Hi, Shambhavi. I'm struggling with the current political climate. I feel this sense of responsibility to pay attention and to bear witness to what is happening right now. But I'm noticing the more I pay attention, the more untethered I feel sometimes. Or I feel like I'm spending so much time bearing witness that is taking me away from the presence in my own day-to-day life. How do I keep myself grounded?
Well, I'll say a few things about that. First of all, it is untethering for many of us. Many of us, in seeing what's going on wherever we're living, especially in the U.S. and other Western countries, seeing what's going on in Palestine and other places, it is untethering. It simply just is. So don't think, I don't want to feel untethered, or I want to be able to do this and not feel untethered. Feeling untethered is part of the wisdom of this situation. What were you tethered to is a better question. A lot of us were tethered or are tethered to false ideas about who this country is and who we are and what humans are capable of. Those are all great things to become untethered from. So I would say that there's an enormous opportunity in this whole circumstance for all of us to become untethered from a bunch of bullshit, basically, and to then really learn more about ourselves and what's actually happening here. That is one of the great opportunities here. When you're witnessing, as you say, or just paying more attention and feeling untethered, you're learning. We're learning, and we need to learn. That's one thing I would say. Another thing I would say is this isn't just about somebody else. You're not just witnessing something about somebody else. This is about us. It's about every one of us. It's about every one of us in the United States, about every one of us in Western Europe, about every one of us on this planet. Because the whole question of what it means to be human is now globally up for grabs. This isn't about somebody else. It's about us. When you're paying attention to it, you're being present with what's about you. It's not that you're not being present with your life. This is your life. This is happening to all of us. And it's happening because of all of us. We all have complicity in it in various ways. And we all need, as far as we're capable of, being part of whatever chance we have of surviving this. So we are in, as I'm sure you've read in various places and on various levels, this is an extinction moment. What else are you going to pay attention to? Really? A lot of people are losing their lives, and a lot of more people will lose their lives, and a lot of us are losing the ground that we thought we were standing on. Various kinds of grounds, conceptual, beliefs, economic, relational grounds. I mean, this is super real, and it's happening to every single one of us. You're not witnessing, you're in your own life participating when you are learning about what's happening and maybe even doing something about it. Yes, there are other things happening in your life, like maybe you said there was little ones around, maybe one of the little ones is yours, or more than one of them, but we have other things to take care of. And yes, you need to continue to do that, but paying attention to what's happening with us in the world is not an extra. It's not an add-on. It's central. And it's okay to be very, very, very uncomfortable about it. I mean, if you're not going to be uncomfortable about live stream genocide and the absolute depravity of your own leaders and the fact that our tax dollars are paying for all of this and that we're destroying the ground that we're standing on, if you're not going to be upset and ungrounded and untethered by that, I mean, really, I have to question your sanity. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jaya Kula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.